Dr. Naresh Gunarantanam will show you how giving hope to orphans of all ages in Sri Lanka warms the heart and soul. You'll learn how the selfless physician and his family have taken the orphanage and its residents as their personal spiritual mission.
Well, I've actually asked the kids, what do you like best about this place? And the consistent answer is that they feel safe and they have a chance to get educated. So this is a place where they feel very secure. They're given 3 meals a day. They're sent to school, and then they're brought in a very secure environment. And then they also have other children just like them who've gone through what they've gone through. And that's a very secure place for these kids, many of whom had gone through severe trauma.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. We now have Dr. Naresh Gunarantanam. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Naresh, if you could let people know a little bit about who you are. I mean, we're going to talk about some of your activities, but who are you?
I'm a gastroenterologist. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm married, have 2 kids. Originally from Sri Lanka. I left when I was about 6, 7, and emigrated to the U.S. when I was about 9.
And Naresh and I are very similar because I immigrated when I was about 9 and from India, so we have similar backgrounds. But now tell us about, we're going to talk about Grace Orphanage, and tell us a little bit about Grace Orphanage and how it was founded, if you could let people know.
Well, Sri Lanka went through a civil war, and at the height of the civil war, there were a lot of orphaned children. And my friend Eric Parkinson, who's a lawyer in California, was actually reading an article and saw that there were a lot of children in need.
How long ago would you say this was?
This was about 2001.
Okay.
And so he felt compelled to help the children, and he actually just was going to raise some money and send the money down to the guys there. And the guys on the other side said, we really don't want your money if your heart's not in it. So Eric felt challenged. And the interesting thing is that it was during September 11, 2001, when all the
September 11th,
September 11th was going on. So he felt compelled to go, and he went to Sri Lanka and founded this orphanage for girls.
And you told me, one interesting point is, I don't know the last time any organization took your money and then when they took your money, sent it back and said, we don't want your money if we can't have your heart. That's unbelievable. It tells you, to me at least, when I heard this story before, is how true their heart is, and how compelling this was for your friend. Is it Eric, right?
Eric.
You said? And Eric flew. When did he flew? Tell them when he flew.
Well, he flew the day after the bombings, and when he
Pretty empty flight, huh?
Empty flight, and he's really a brave guy and one of the kindest persons I've ever met. But he flew to a country he didn't know, a culture he didn't know, but he felt compelled in his heart to do this. And he met with the group down there, and they bought an abandoned beach resort and started this orphanage.
Wow. And and we always talk about scientific evidence in the show, but I mean, I see nothing but whatever people believe in, if they believe in a spirit or if they believe in that things are meant to be. But it's very, to me, Eric was the guy meant to do this. And I think before when we talked, you told me that he was actually, was he a real estate lawyer or no?
He was a general lawyer, defense lawyer.
And he was able to actually, so he goes to Sri Lanka and he finds this wonderful beach resort, which because of the Civil War wasn't being used, but he was able to broker a deal to get this at a great price. I mean, if Naresh and I went there, we would not know how to do that. I mean, it's the right guy at the right time when he started this orphanage. The other thing is, let people know where Sri Lanka is. I bet you a lot of people who are watching don't even know where Sri Lanka is. Where is it?
Sri Lanka is a little tiny island under India. It's about the size of West Virginia. It's a very densely populated country with about 21 million people.
Yeah, well, beautiful beaches, beautiful places to visit. So it was a wonderful country, but it was ravaged by Civil War. When did you hear about this orphanage, and how did you get involved?
Well, Eric, initially we had 100 girls, and this is an all-girls orphanage. And through various contacts, he contacted me and said, I'd like you to help with some of the medical issues with the orphanage. And so in 2003, we flew together. We were there together, and I still remember what he said before I went there. He said, bro, whatever you do, don't look into their eyes. And I said, why? It's like, once you look into their eyes, you see the souls of your children. And, and that's very powerful, but it's exactly what drew me in, because when you see these children, they're no different from your own children. And when you start looking at these children, you start thinking of them as your children, and that's one of the things that kept me going.
And so when you tell us what happened when you first landed there and started seeing the place. And I guess so. You left when you were very very young. So what had you gone back since then?
We used to go back when I was young, so I have fond memories of growing up there. So we used to go every summer for a month or so.
But you hadn't gone for a while before then, right?
Correct. Because of the Civil War,
Right.
we hadn't traveled in about 8 or 9 years.
And tell people what you saw. I mean, so those of you who have never been to Sri Lanka or maybe never will, what was the sight that you saw, and how was the country when you visited there after the Civil War?
Well, it's interesting. If you go to the major city, Colombo, it's like any other metropolitan city. But as you go in towards Trincomalee, which is where the orphanage is, it's almost like going back in time because the roads start falling apart, infrastructure falls apart, and it literally is going back in time. It feels like you're traveling back 100 years because everything is ruined.
But then you also told me, I think I was you or Eric, that seeing all these young children with no parents. I mean, and then the second generation of seeing the parents of these folks that don't have their kids. I mean, that was pretty unusual, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, I think one of the things that we found is that I connected with the children immediately, in part due to my own circumstances. I lost my dad when I was a teenager, so I could fully empathize with the fact that how much of a travesty it is to lose a parent when you're young.
It's horrible, yeah.
And so I could empathize with the fact that some of them, had lost one parent, some had lost both, but were also caught up in poverty, war, and a lot of other things that people don't typically have to deal with.
We have to take a break. When we come back, we'll share more with Dr. Gunarantanam. Please don't go away.
That you see these beautiful children that have the same capacity and the same future and the innocence of your own children, yet they're in circumstances beyond their control.
Back again, we're talking with Naresh about seeing some of these orphans that are in Sri Lanka, and you were saying that you could empathize with them because you had lost your father at a young age. And what was interesting, I remember you told me there, that you actually, are there a lot of homeless orphans in Sri Lanka?
There are, as a function of poverty, many of the children in these areas come from very poor families. So even if some don't have lost both parents, but even if they have one parent, usually a mother, she's usually unable to take care of them. So they're essentially wandering the streets. So we take them away from the streets and give them shelter, food, and a chance to have education.
In the orphanage?
At the orphanage. Well, we have a school bus that takes them to the local school. But, they're fed, they're clothed, they're sent to school. We have tutors that come in that teach them, to help them catch up.
Well, that's great. That's great. And tell me what the toughest, you told me something very interesting. When you look in their eyes, you feel like you see the eyes of your own children. So what is the most difficult part of working with them, and also in that part of the world, I mean, where you don't always have control over what happens to these poor kids? What's the most difficult part of this?
Well, I think the main thing is that you see these beautiful children that have the same capacity and the same future and the innocence of your own children, yet they're in circumstances beyond their control due to war, way beyond their control. But you feel very helpless because the way you think about your own children, you want to protect them, you want to take care of them, and make sure they live to their potential. And when you see these children, you want that same for them because they're no different. You still connect with them emotionally. But there's so many of them. So at least at our place, we can say we're not going to take care of the world, but at least for these 50 children, we're going to be able to do something positive for them.
Oh, that's great. And it's a very important thing you said, we're not very different. I mean, everybody that wants the best for their kids, that, to see their kids thrive and at least have the opportunity. And what's tough, and people who've never been to this part of the world, it's very difficult to describe what it's like when there are kids who will never have that opportunity unless there's intervention. I remember, even as a child, I've told, my family about this several times, that I remember at night that I would be at it was in Bangalore, India, and we'd be at our gate, and what would happen is that little boys would come and beg for food, and they would just come, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't be, indirect. They would say, please, can I have some food? Mother, can I have some food? And I still get chills when I hear it, because how fortunate we are here. And I know what you mean when you say you want these kids to thrive and have the same opportunities, because what the situation they're in is no fault of theirs. And that's incredibly difficult. So, if you have any opportunities to do anything either in Sri Lanka or any part of the world, because we're super fortunate here, just remember there are people, the real kids that you can make differences in, and we'll talk about that. So back to present day now. Your whole family is involved in this orphanage, right? Tell me about that.
It is. I have two children. I have Sejal, who's a 12-year-old girl, and Nikhil, who's a 9-year-old boy, and then my wife. And I took them there. We went there about a year and a half ago, and it was really remarkable for them. My daughter had been conversing with the children by Skype with her classmates since 4th grade, so she kind of knew who they were. And
she was Skyping with them.
Yeah, their teacher, Mr. Bauman, was an awesome teacher, so he made it as part of his classroom. Every Friday morning, they would Skype with the kids, and each one would present something about their culture or do a math problem, but they would do it consistently, and they got to know each other, not as abstract concepts as children in poor countries, but other kids who like to play and who celebrate holidays and who just like to have fun.
And when you first told your daughter about this, was she pretty receptive, or what was she a little bit?
Well, it was very interesting because, when kids start talking, it's just about kid stuff, and she was interested in what they wear and what they eat and how much they play with and what they play, what they like to do when they play. And it was interesting when I took her there, she didn't understand poverty. I mean, she grew up in a very affluent area. She'd never saw poverty. And so when she was taking there, she was actually in shock because, you go from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Sri Lanka in Trincomalee, which is majority of the people live in poverty. So she was not used to seeing children without clothes, houses that were falling down, and so forth. So for the first few days, she was terribly unhappy. And I had a conversation with her. I said, Sejal, why are you so upset? And she said, Dad, I feel really bad for these kids. And then we said, well, I don't think they want you to feel bad for them. They're just like you. And hopefully when you go back, you can think about all the opportunities you have and perhaps put yourself in a position to help them in the future. So it gave her perspective. I could never have taught her everything that she saw and gained for herself. I mean, simple things like she would say, hey, Dad, how come that girl doesn't have shoes? And I would say, gee, if your mom or dad is not able to buy you the shoe, or you had a shoe and the shoe broke, no one's going to take you to Target to get another shoe.
Right.
So it really made it connected to when you see poverty for yourself. And then now she's more receptive and she sees these people as her sisters and she wants to help them. So both kids are very engaged in fundraising and promoting grace.
So not just very important lessons that these are not just a bunch of poor kids or poor people, but they're just like you and I, or as like your daughter, just like me, who don't have as much, and how can we get there? And this is what we're talking about. This is the feeling that you get when you're helping these folks is our emotional dividend, and a great story. Naresh, thank you very much for coming here with us today.